Next speaker, Dr. Shruti Nishan, who is the Executive Director of Pediatric Ophthalmologist, Squint and Neuro-Ophthalmologist at the MNI Hospital. Very qualified from high centers of education. She has many presentations and publications to her credit with special interest in visual disability in special children, neurooptometry, low vision, nystagmus, and complex strabismus. She's going to be talking to us on refractive errors in strabismus. On to you, Dr. Shruti.
Thank you for the kind introduction, ma'am. See my screen now?
I think others should be on mute.
Yeah, it's visible. Dr. Shruti, it's visible. Please go ahead.
So good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Shruti, and today I'm going to be talking about the love-hate relationship between refractive errors and squint. To talk about one more love-hate, which is the PGs and squint. So I think that is a story for another day, and I hope at the end of the webinar, we have a love-love relationship between PGs and squint. So coming on to the topic, all the refractive errors generally tend to have an effect on strabismus some way or the other. Hyperopia tends to produce more of esotropias, whereas myopia tends to manifest more as exotropias. Now we will talk a little more in detail in a case-based way. So this was a 3.5-year-old girl who came to us with an inward deviation of her eye. You can see that she has a left esotropia. Her cycloplegic refraction was about plus 3.5 in both her eyes. So when, like any well-meaning pediatric ophthalmologist, the first thing we do when there is a squint plus a hyperopic correction is to give a full cycloplegic correction. And so after full cycloplegic correction, you can see that she has completely corrected. So this is nothing but a refractive accommodative esotropia. Now, this was already covered by Dr. Vaishnavi. I'm just going to elaborate more. So how does hyperopia actually cause the esotropia? Hyperopia increases the accommodative effort made by the eye, which in turn increases convergence and thereby leading to esotropia. So when you give them the glasses, you relieve the accommodative effort, thereby relieving convergence and relieving the ESO. So it's usually seen between 1.5 years to 4 years in age. It's about 1 to 2% in prevalence. Seen more in children who have a positive family history or a close stereopsis, especially seen in anisometropic hyperopia as well. So what is the relationship between hyperopia and esotropia? It's extremely dose dependent. So there is a study that says that between 2 to 3 diopters, this is a meta-analysis, they found a 10-fold increase in the risk of esotropia in hyperopes. Between +3 to +5, a 40-fold increase, and more than 5 diopters, it's a 218-fold. So that's a really high risk if the dioptric power is more than +5. Now, is it just a single entity or is there a spectrum? You can see that the patient we saw was a purely refractive accommodative where the esotropia disappears after full cycloplegic correction. There's an entity where it is partial or decompensated, where in spite of wearing the full cycloplegic correction, more than 10 PD residual esotropia occurs. And then there's the entity with high AC by ratio where there is a near distance disparity. Here you can see that there's an ESO which is partially corrected with glasses and then fully corrected after the surgical procedure. Here you have to instruct the parents that the ESO will remain once the child removes the glasses, but about 10 years of age, it will generally disappear along with the refractive error. Now here, accommodative ESO with high AC by A, you have to prescribe executive bifocals with the line bisecting the pupil. And here you can see the child is completely off glasses and off squint after probably 10 years of age. Now, the important DD is to differentiate it from infantile ESOs, and infantile ESOs usually happen at a very young age, less than 1 year. They are very large angle ESOs, and they tend to have cross fixation patterns. Now, these are the ways you differentiate between the two entities. Now, moving on to surgical considerations in esotropia and hyperopia, you always treat the amblyopia first because otherwise you have higher chances of consecutive exo. Preferred surgical modality would be bimedial rectus recessions, and if there is a high AC by ratio, you add probably a posterior fixation suture of Farden or modified Farden or Scott's, whatever your procedure would be. All right, so finished with hyperopia. Can anisometropia cause strabismus? Yes, we do know that anisometropic amblyopia is one of the important causes. And as I told you, anisohyperopes have a high chance of ending up with esotropia. And this is also followed by anisomyopes and anisoastigmatism. So this is the chart by Donahue et al., which shows about the screening guidelines for amblyopia risk factors in children and when you should prescribe glasses. All right, so moving on to another patient. Here you see a young adult comes to me with this intermittent, this exotropia, which is seen on and off. And with the minus 2.5 cycloplegic refraction, minus 2.5 correction, you can see that the child is able to correct the squint very well and keep it under control. So this is nothing but the entity called intermittent exotropia. And here you see that myopia is very commonly associated with this entity. Donter's study went on to see almost 70% of association, but now that's been disproved with the latest studies. The risk factors for intermittent exotropia with myopia is Asian ethnicity, because we are more predisposed to myopia, female gender, younger age, and excessive near work. It's very important to give them appropriate correction of myopic glasses and never to undercorrect such cases. So when you appropriately correct them, the control improves. Now again, why does intermittent XT and myopia work together? Because it's a classic case of chicken or the egg, which came first. Now, the traditional teaching is that the myopia leads to the exotropia. How? It increases the accommodative demand, which decreases the convergence, thereby increasing exotropia. The newer hypothesis that has come about is that the intermittent XT increases the convergence, thereby increasing the accommodative demand and thereby leading to progression of myopia. So, right. So when just minus glasses don't work, you can also prescribe over minus glasses. So when do you prescribe them? When there's a small angle exotropia, you prescribe about -1 to -4 diopter, depending on the visual acuity and how much the child is able to tolerate and what controls the squint. And this will in turn stimulate accommodative convergence and keep the IXT in check. It can be done as a modality in small XTs, also after surgery, in order to bring the XT, residual XT under control. All right, so when we are planning for surgery in IXT with myopia, there are certain things that we have to be careful about. The first thing is that the higher the myopic error, the more unpredictable the surgical response is. And why is that? Mostly because of the prismatic effect of the glasses, the thicker glasses that happens. The glasses provide
screen share వచ్చింది అది వచ్చింది
background. Can someone
Yeah, Dr. Anil, can you mute you?
Dr. Anil, you have to mute.
Yeah. Sorry. So
Yeah.
we'll carry
Yes,
on.
Shruti?
So the prismatic effect of the glasses provides a basin kind of an effect. So what happens is it increases the measured deviation from the true deviation, which means that a 30 prism might probably measure as a 35 or a 40 prism. So what should we do in such cases? You will have to undercorrect. So when you have a minus, you'll have to decrease. So remember, minus, reduce. So when there is a minus glasses, you reduce the exo deviation. There are tables to help us with that, and you can just stick it on our OPD for easy reference. All right, so this is going to be my last topic. So can myopia cause esotropia? We've seen how myopia causes exotropia. Can it cause esotropia? So we'll see with the case again. Here, this is a 22-year-old girl who came with the right eye -5.75, left eye -14.5 diopter. Here you can see she has a esotropia with a hypertropia with a limited abduction and a limited elevation. So on MRI, you can see that there is a superior rectus as nasalized and the lateral rectus as inferiorized. So this is nothing but the heavy eye syndrome or the esotropia hypertropia complex seen in myopia. So what basically happens is, because the globe is so elongated, it subluxates into the temporal portion, and they're causing a nasalization of the superior rectus and inferiorization of the lateral rectus. So what we do in the surgical procedure is we bring these two muscles, the superior and the lateral rectus, together with a non-absorbable suture around 14 mm behind the insertion. By bringing them together, we push the prolapsed globe back into the orbital position and in the right position and suture it together. So this is how this is lateral rectus is being identified. You can see that once we isolate it, we take 7 + 7, 14 mm, and you put the 50 non-absorbable suture there. One arm goes into one side, and then we take the next superior rectus, and then we take the other arm of the needle there and then bring both together. As you pull both together, you can see the globe going inwards, and then you put the suture and tie the knot, and we close the conjunctiva. So that's the end of it. You can see the superior rectus and the lateral rectus coming together 14 mm behind. So this is the post-operative result. You can see the eye globe coming perfectly aligned, and that's abduction improved. So here's the take-home message. Myopia is usually associated with exotropia, where minus and over minus glasses help. Hyperopia is associated in a dose-dependent manner with ESO, and plus glasses help. Astigmatism and isometropia both can cause strabismus. It's important to reduce the measured deviation in high myopes and increase the measured deviation in high hyperopes. I thank Dr. Chitra and Dr. Muralidhar for giving me the opportunity, and I thank my big gurus from Shankara Nethralaya, from where I learned my pediatric ophthalmology. Thank you.
That was a wonderful talk, Shruti. I mean, non-pediatric ophthalmologists like us were also so interested.
Thank you, ma'am.
So there's one very basic question I have before Dr. Arun would take over. When would you attempt to wean glasses with children on accommodative esophageal?
So we follow them up regularly, maybe 3 months, 6 months, and then every time we have to look for the squint. So as long as we reduce 0.5 and we see whether the ortho is maintained. If the child goes into esophoria, we still have to maintain it on that. If the child goes into a mild exo, then you can reduce the plus. So it's a every follow up, you just reduce 0.5 and check for the component of tropia, whether it is reducing or still stagnant. So that's how we reduce it as per thing. Of course, we follow the cycloplegic refraction as a guideline also to help us with the
Maybe, but in very high hyperopias, like above 5 and all, it may not happen at all.
Yeah,
Weaning
it might
takes even
not.
longer.
Yes, they might not end up with 0 eventually. They'll still end up with some amount of plus, but mostly the squint might reduce or disappear. And around 10 years of age is when they kind of wean out of the glasses.
Dr. Arun?
Dr. Shruti, nice presentation, madam. I just had a quick question. Is there any role of refractive surgeries in accommodative esotropias?
In accommodative esophageal?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not too aware of that, because in usually with glasses they seem to do pretty well. Are you talking about hyperopic, pure refractive accommodative?
Yeah, pure refractive accommodative.
I'm not aware of performing refractive surgery in such cases, because glasses.
No, I think you can do it. Like suppose if the child is eligible, like the child is above the age of 18 years under stable refraction, it's like any other refractive error, and definitely correcting the hypermetropia will correct the esotropy also.
Okay.
So definitely
We had
there is a-
to it. One is, of course, that hyperopic refractive procedures are not very successful. At least that's what our understanding is till now. And secondly, they are usually presenting to us at a much younger age before you can intervene. But yeah, if you have an older patient who has an accommodative component to his deviation, and he wants to be cosmetically improved, so including surgical intervention for any residual deviation, we of course can advise as a way to remove the glasses if it is successful. So while it's not very popular, because we don't see so many patients who are 18 or much older with significant residual hyperopia and accommodative esotropia, a potential possibility, of course, is there.
So one important point I'd like to mention, Dr. Shruti has already highlighted. Whenever we are examining any case of strabismus, it's very, very important to use an accommodative target. So most of us just take up a torchlight and try to see the corneal reflex. So you totally miss the accommodative esotropia. So examining with an accommodative target is extremely important. I have one question for Dr. Shruti.
Sir, we had done a study in.
Yes, Jitendra. Yeah.
Go ahead. I think there's a
Sir,
link problem.
Had,
Arun, you go on
Okay.
with your
Yeah. So one question for Dr. Shruti. So if there is a patient with exotropia and hypermetropia,
Yes,
how
sir.
do you go about correcting the refractive error?
Yeah, so ideally I would undercorrect the hypermetropia, definitely, because by undercorrecting in itself you kind of try and bring some amount of control. Definitely not full correction.
Full
As
correction.
undercorrect as possible, like as much as I can, I will undercorrect this patient
Sure.
and then surgically correct the exo.
Sure.